So I wanted to start today with a story from my childhood. This is sort of like family lore. It's one of those stories that like every year at Thanksgiving somehow it gets brought up. So I thought I would bring you in to my family and share the story with you. So I want you to picture this. Long ago, when the world was young and I was little. No, I was in elementary school, and my sister and I were at one of the local colleges taking lessons, as one does when they are a child. You take all of the lessons. So I was there. My sister was there. The lessons end, and of course, we were running late, as one does when they are a child and take all of the lessons. So we were running to the car, me and my sister and my mom, full out sprinting, things flying everywhere. And all of a sudden, my mom passed out, dead on the ground in the middle of the parking lot. Now, I had never seen anyone pass out before, so I didn't know what fainting was. My kid brain had no category for what had just happened. So I did the only logical thing that I knew to do, which was, of course, to completely lose my mind. I started screaming, "My mom is dead! Help!" like over and over, screaming it at the top of my lungs, sobbing. People are coming out of buildings. The birds are flying in the air. Like, it's a whole thing. And my mom is lying on the ground, not dead. And my sister is standing there telling me to shut up because everything's going to be fine, saying things like, "This is why we can't take you anywhere," and all of that. I'm crying. My sister's mad. My mom is dead. It's a bad moment. So eventually my mom comes to. Of course, she's dazed and confused. I'm still sobbing. So she looks at me and says, "Well, what happened?" And I said, "You died." And so to this day, we bring up the story where mom died, but she didn't. But the reason that we bring it up is because this is the moment that everyone in my family realized that if the world was coming to an end, I should not be in charge. I am not the one you want leading the way during an evacuation. I am not the one you want when people need to stay calm, because that is not me. I will be screaming. I will be narrating what is happening and making it worse. This is not a good person to be in charge of chaos. But what I have learned since then is that the opportunity to lead does not wait for perfect people and perfect circumstances. Life has this way of throwing you into moments where somebody is watching you, or somebody needs you. Someone is following your lead, even if you didn't sign up for it. So you better saddle up and lead the way. Now, maybe it's not a crisis like your mom dead in a parking lot. Maybe it is in your home, with your kids watching how you handle the pressure of living in the DMV and going through what we're going through. Maybe it's at work when everyone around is waiting to see if you will join in on the complaining or if you will bring the joy instead. Maybe it's in your friend group when someone just needs you to be the voice of faith because they're losing theirs. Or maybe it's at church and you notice a new person and the Holy Spirit says, "I want you to talk to that one." Or here's a big one. Maybe it's in your marriage and you're starting to feel distant and separated, and you have to be the first one to say, "I'm sorry." You see, the truth is, the question is not whether you are a leader. The question is, what kind of leader are you? Because make no mistake, someone is watching you. Someone is following you. Someone is being shaped by the way you lead. So how do we, as a church, become a leader who is worth following? How do we move from panic and self-focus and confusion and chaos to the kind of leader who can confidently say, "Follow me as I follow Christ"? Because let's be honest, that is not easy. It is not natural. Everything in us wants to protect ourselves, fix ourselves, save ourselves. But that is not the way God intended it. There is a better way. And we have been in this series of sermons called Saddle Up, We're following the Lord. And in it, we've been going through the story of Abram, or Abraham, same guy. And this week, we will continue his story to see what true kingdom leadership looks like. So, if you have your Bible, we're going to be in Genesis 14. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. If you do not have a Bible, we have Bibles in the seats in front of you. Those are for you. You can take those home with you. You can give them to someone who doesn't have a Bible. But we want you to look it up. So we will be in Genesis chapter 14. And as you are turning there, I just want to give you a little update about where we are in the story of Abram. So Abram and Lot, Abram is the uncle, Lot is the nephew, have been traveling together for a while now. God called Abram to leave and go, and Lot was like, cool, can I come too? And he did. You know the person who always ends up on your trips even though they didn't get invited? That's Lot. And at first it is fine. Everything is good. They are being blessed beyond measure. They've got so many animals, so many servants, so much stuff that the land that they are on literally can't handle it. And so their shepherds start fighting over grazing rights. Abram's guys are like, hey, that's our well. And Lot's guys are like, no, we were here first. And then they're like toddlers fighting over this land. And Abram, like any good parent to a toddler, is over it. And so he comes up with a plan. Now, the plan he comes up with is definitely not the plan I would have come up with if it were me and I was Abram. I would have pulled rank. I would have been asking like, so do you have a covenant with God? No, cool. So I'm going to do what I want, and everybody else, you are just stuck with it. But that's not what Abram does, because he's better than me. So Abram says, Lot, you can pick whatever land you want. Anything you want. You go left, I'll go right. You go right, I'll go left. You pick it. There's no sense in us fighting. We're family. So Lot looks around, and he sees this place that is lush and green and beautiful. The Bible even describes it as looking like the garden of the Lord. And Lot's like, that's the one I want. That's where I'm going. There's just a small problem. It is by this city named Sodom. Yes, that Sodom. And Sodom does not have a great reputation. But Lot doesn't care. Because he is not thinking about God or God's presence. He is thinking about where the grass looks greener. Lot is thinking about comfort. And while it wasn't a wise decision, Abram goes along with it. And then chapter 14 begins. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to read the first 11 verses because nobody wants to hear me butcher 15 names that sound like rejected Star Wars characters. But the gist of what happens in those first 11 verses is chaos. There are 4 kings that rise up against 5 kings. It's empire versus empire. It's like the ancient world version of World War. Every king is flexing their might. Every army is on the move. And the whole earth feels like it's holding its breath. And these kings are not godly men. There's just a bunch of people who don't know who God is, and they're trying to prove who the boss is of this piece of dirt. Sound familiar? And add to that the kings in the east had been ruling over some smaller cities, including Sodom and Gomorrah, for about 12 years. But in the 13th year, the city is getting tired of it. And they rebel, and they say, we don't want to pay your taxes anymore. This is the original Boston Tea Party. And so King, and I practiced this one, so Kedorlaomer, he doesn't like it when people mess with his money. So he gathers all of his allies, there's 3 other kings, and they just start sweeping through the land like a storm. And they take out everyone and everything in their way. And so by the time we get to verse 11, things are bad. The 4 kings have overpowered the 5 kings. Sodom and Gomorrah has been lost. People are scattered. Possessions are taken. And tucked into all of this chaos is a little guy by the name of Lot. Remember him? The one who picked the land that looked good, the one who picked comfort, and the one who picked himself. Let's look at what happens to him in verse 12. Genesis 14, verse 12 says, they also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. That one verse carries the weight of 1,000 bad decisions. You see, you cannot live in Sodom and not expect Sodom to eventually live in you. What happened to Lot is the picture of what happens when our decisions are driven by what looks good instead of who is good. You know, we love to tell ourselves that we can camp close enough to sin just to enjoy the view, but we're not going to get caught up in it. We're just going to peek over the fence and just see what those people are doing, but we're going to stay far enough away that we'll be safe. We think we can manage the proximity without consequences. We think that we are untouchable, that there's some invisible bubble keeping us clean while everything around us gets dirty. But Lot teaches us the hard truth that there is no such bubble. We cannot flirt with compromise and walk away unscathed. We cannot set up camp next to destruction and expect to remain untouched. The closer we get to sin, no matter how shiny or how good or how lush and green it looks, the more likely it is to grab a hold of us. I mean, look at Lot. He is taken, dragged away, captive, everything stolen from him. His bubble has been popped by something that he thought he could control. And now the story starts to pivot. So read verses 13 and 14 with me. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of a place in Amorite, brother of Eshcol and of Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men. And I'm going to stop right there. So a fugitive survivor runs to Abram and he says, "Your nephew's been taken." And I'm sure Abram was like, "Oh, I'm shocked." But something in Abram actually shifts. A part of him starts to step into this covenant promise that he had with God. He remembers walking under the open skies with God, and he remembers all of the altars that he's built, and he remembers it, and something sacred inside of him wakes up. He becomes a warrior. A man who built altars is now building courage. And hear me when I say this. Abram does not rise because of his own pride. He rises because of purpose. Because when you have been in God's presence, rescue will become your reflex. When you've really been with God, when you've sat in his goodness, when his faithfulness has met you in the dark, and when mercy has cleaned up your mess, something will change in you. And you will start to move differently and see things differently, and you will lead differently. When you have experienced the God who came running after you, it becomes impossible to sit around when someone else is stuck. You have to move. And that's what happened to Abram. He didn't need a pep talk. He didn't need a sign from heaven. Abram doesn't even call a meeting. He doesn't weigh the pros and the cons. He just says, "Let's go." He doesn't even say, "Well, Lot made his bed. He should just lay in it." And this is huge. Think about this for a second. Really think about it, because Abram could have said, "Well, Lot chose that land. He chose that city. He chose the chaos. This is on him, not my problem." And I wouldn't have blamed him. Lot made the choice. Lot took the risk. Lot messed up. But Abram doesn't do that. He doesn't calculate blame or walk away with a pat on his back saying, "Yeah, you should stay here out of trouble. That's good." No, he moves. He steps in. He takes responsibility for this guy. He sees someone he loves in trouble, and his first thought is not judgment, it is action. And this is our first lesson of leadership, that real leadership is not about keeping score or measuring fairness. Real leadership does not point fingers, it just moves. Real leadership sees a need and says, I will go. Abram shows us that when God calls a man, he calls him to move toward the chaos, not away from it. Even when it's messy, even when it's inconvenient, even when it is not our fault. Abram responded like the God who left the 99 to go find the one. That is amazing. And it's also convicting, specifically for me, because how many times do I see a mess and think, somebody should really clean that up, and then just keep walking? But Abram shows us that maybe we are that somebody. And I know that's hard. I know that it is so much easier to lead when everything's organized and when nothing is chaotic and everybody is listening to you and doing exactly what you want them to do. We want to help when it's easy, not when it's costly. But Abram shows us that leadership in God's kingdom doesn't wait for comfort. It responds to calling. And right here, that calling is going to collide with action. So let's read the full verse of verse 14. When Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So Abram hears about Lot, looks around, grabs 318 of his men, the original 300 Sparta. Anybody? And he says, let's go. Let's do this. And this is definitely not a huge army by any standard. It's just Abram's household, his servants, the ones he knows he can trust, and he moves. And don't forget that the world is literally at war. Kings are chasing each other. Empires are burning cities to the ground. And Abram takes his 318 friends and says, let's go. He doesn't wait for a perfect army. He doesn't wait for ideal resources or for some grand opportunity to present himself. He uses what he has, not what he wishes he had. Because leadership is not about waiting for perfection. It is about stepping up with what is in your hands and trusting God with it. It's about seeing the need, giving your whatever you have to God, and moving forward in faith. Abram doesn't have a massive army. He doesn't have the perfect plan. He just has to say yes. And God does the rest. Do you realize how many times we are put in positions to lead, to step up, to be the person who cleans up the mess, and we immediately start making excuses? I don't have enough time. I don't have enough experience. I don't have enough resources, followers, money, confidence. And we start counting our weaknesses instead of counting on God. We start rehearsing every reason we can't instead of just stepping into what he has already given us. Abram didn't doubt. He doesn't overthink. He doesn't make excuses. He just moves. And the plan that follows, Andrew said, should have been made into a movie as we were reading this together. So, starting in verse 15, and he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them, and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot, with his possessions, and women and people. So Abram, who was yesterday not a warrior, but is now, divides his men and attacks at night. At night. Now, I don't like the dark, but apparently it was a good idea because Abram moves under moonlight and doesn't check the clock. He just says, we're going to do this, and it's going to save Lot. And here's where we learn our next lesson about leadership. leadership is often in the darkness. It is not glamorous. There's no fanfare, no spotlight, no applause to tell you you're doing a great job. There's often not even a guarantee that what you're doing is going to work. But leadership will not wait for recognition. Leadership shows up in the unseen, in the quiet, in the moments when everyone else is sleeping or hiding in fear. You see, the world wants to celebrate the hero when the battle is won. But God calls leaders to act before victory is visible. Before the crowd cheers, before the outcome is clear, before the win is even in sight. Leadership is about faithfulness in the dark, when the night is heavy, and trusting that God's light will be enough to guide every step. And here's the beautiful part: God's light is always enough. Not tomorrow, not when everything lines up perfectly. God's light is enough right now. Every step you take in obedience, every act of courage taken in the unseen, guided by Him, is enough. The world may not notice, and the enemy might try to shake you, but God sees you. I mean, look at our story. Abraham and his 318 men win. Not because they're the strongest or the biggest army, but because when God's hand is on your life, you don't need numbers. You just need His name. Abram chases the kings down, recovers everything that's stolen, the goods, the people, his family. And I love this rescue because this is the moment that Abram, the covenant man, becomes the covering man. Abram was not just fighting for victory. He was fighting for redemption. And this is where we get to the heart of what kingdom leadership is. You see, great leaders will always reflect the heart of a God who says, I'll just go get him myself. Abram may not have known it, but in rescuing Lot, he was echoing heaven's story. The one where Jesus came running down, not through battlefields, but through blood and wood and nails, down to a sin-filled earth, just to bring us back home. Abram was echoing the story of a God who saw us and said, I'm coming. Church, if we want to answer the question about what kind of leader we are, if we're wondering whether we are the leader like Abram, who is steady and faithful and courageous, or the leader like me in a crisis situation who panics, the answer will be found in your eyes. It will be found in what you are looking for, in what we see. Do we see what the world overlooks? Do we see that one person who is suffering in silence? Do we see the one person who is isolated and in pain? Do we see the person who made the worst choice of their life and is now under the slavery of sin? The one who is captive to circumstances that they cannot escape on their own. Do we see them? Leadership will not measure success by how much we have, what resources we control, or how impressive our strategies appear. True leadership measures the value of a single soul. The life of the one God put directly in front of us, and then it will step into the cost to bring them back. And sometimes that cost is risk. Stepping into situations that are messy and uncomfortable and dangerous. Sometimes the cost is just time. Investing when you have nothing left to give sometimes. Sometimes the cost is emotional, feeling the weight of heartbreak with your friend and the weight of disappointment and failure as if it was your own. Sometimes the cost is your reputation. Standing for what is right is not always popular, and it might make you misunderstood. Sometimes the cost of leadership is just our comfort. Leaving the safe and the easy and the predictable path to walk into uncertainty and obedience is painful sometimes. And I know it's hard to hear this, but it is the truth, because leadership in the kingdom will always cost something, because love has a cost. You cannot lead like God leads without stepping into risk, without giving more than you thought you had, without facing the cost. That's the deal. That's the tension, but it's also the beauty, because God knew the cost and he still sent his son. Jesus knew the cost and he still went to the cross. Jesus knew the cost and endured the pain and the rejection and the death to bring back souls, one at a time. And that is the pattern for kingdom leadership. It's costly because it reflects the heart of a God who doesn't calculate based on comfort or safety, but on the worth of your soul. And when we follow that pattern, when we step into that kind of costly love, and we begin to lead like him with courage and faith and with a heart willing to pay a price, someone will be rescued. So the question for today that I want to leave you with is this: who needs you to move today, even if there's a cost? Maybe it's someone in your home right across the hallway who just needs you to be a little bit more patient. Maybe it's someone at work who is struggling quietly and hoping just one person might notice them. God has placed someone in every one of our lives that we can help rescue. And just like Abram, just like Jesus, we have a choice. Will we move? Will we step into the cost? Will we take the risk and go into the unknown just with what we have in our hands and let God do what only he can do? It might be inconvenient, sorry. It might stretch you, but remember, God calls leaders. He calls us to take the first step, and then he will meet us in the risk. He will multiply what we bring. He will strengthen what feels weak. He will use our obedience to bring people home. So don't just hear that question, who needs you to move? I want you to really let it land in your heart and see that person that only you can reach. And then move and act and love and lead like God leads, with courage, with faith, and with a heart for the one.